Hello DevLearn Selection Committee, my name is Karl Richter. This is a preview of a presentation I've put together called Blended Learning Recipes. This is a presentation I'm very excited about, would love the chance to do it at the best conference, DevLearn. This is something I've only done once for my local ATD chapter. However, it is something that I've put a tremendous amount of time on. It really, hopefully, is a nice, memorable, mouth-watering look into the wonderful world of blended learning. I hope this quick sample explains what I love about it, and what I've left out are a lot of my specific concrete examples of different things, but I wanted you to get a sense of my style and the overall message that I'm trying to give. Obviously, the 60-minute version would be a lot longer than the quick version that I'm giving to you now. But I hope you like it. So I like to think of myself as a chef, even though I almost never cook. When I do cook, it's never anything more complicated than macaroni and cheese. I definitely don't work in a restaurant. I am a blended learning designer. Now, blended learning is known as the combination of face-to-face and online training, but in this session we're going to talk about how it's really a lot more than that. There's a lot of other things that we can blend in, ways that we can look at the different ingredients we put in our blend, including really important things like on-the-job training or just-in-time training, performance support tools, whatever you want to call it. What I'm talking about is the ability to do at work and on the job what we're doing in our regular life. We go out and we look stuff up all the time. Oh, I just needed to find out how to fix my sump pump, so there was a YouTube video that showed me how to do that. We live in this wonderful world where we have all this access to information, and as modern learners, we need to be able to go ahead and tap into that same mindset when we're trying to learn on the job. So do consider creating assets that are part of on-the-job learning, and also taking advantage of learners' motivation, making them interested in and have them gobble up your message. Have them learn more through including elements of things like gamification. So I like to say that I'm a chef because I feed the brains of the organizations that hire me. Here's a look inside a brain. Since all this takes place behind our bony skulls, it's easy to forget that there's like real physical things that are happening in our brains as we learn. So what you see here are the ends of two different brain cells. We have an axon and a dendrite. And you see the little dots that are in that picture there that show the sort of chemical connection between these two different brain cells. That's actually where information is stored. So as we learn about new things, we're actually creating new synapses in our brains. The more we fire those synapses, the more we use those neurons, those connections between our brain cells, the more those cells are coated in a thick white substance called myelin. But before I get too nerdy and start talking about myelination, I'm going to go ahead and bring in a special guest star. Does everyone know who this is? My guess is you do. She's the star of many things, including Dr. John Medina's wonderful book, Brain Rules. And in that, he talks about something called the Jennifer Aniston neuron, where Dr. Medina and his team were doing research, and they were looking at the different participants under magnetic image scans. So they're actually able to see the brain activity lighting up in people's brains. And the wonderful discovery, the Jennifer Aniston neuron, as it's called, was showed when the participants were showed different pictures. Now, your brain has 8 billion or so of these neurons. There's a lot of different connections in there, but they were able to locate one particular synapse that would light up when the person was shown a picture of Jennifer Aniston, and it wouldn't light up when it was shown even another 90s actress, like, say, Christina Applegate. Very similar, but that would not actually light up. They would not actually see that synapse fire unless it was a picture of Jennifer Aniston. Now, we learned that it actually would fire for different situations for Jennifer Aniston, different haircuts, like the short bob she had in season 1, or maybe later on, that really that synapse would actually store the information about Jennifer Aniston. So you may be saying, Karl, this is ridiculous. Why are you talking to me about Jennifer Aniston? What does that have to do with learning? It's physical proof that we actually have physical changes that take place in our brain when we learn. Let's take a little deeper look at that. So how much do you actually know about Jennifer Aniston? Are you look at her picture and say, I kind of know who that is? Do you look at it and confidently say, yep, Jennifer Aniston, she was in Friends, she was in Office Space, wonderful movie. She was in a lot of things. Or are you someone that can look at her and really have, because you read Us Weekly every week, and every week there's a different story about Jennifer Aniston in there, so you're going to have a very well-formed synapse that knows all kinds of different things about Jennifer Aniston, especially if you're a fan. So you could look at it and say, oh, that's when she broke up with Brad, but hadn't started Vince. I can tell by the hair, and well, she's at this, and I know they were at that event. You're going to have a lot more information, and the strength of your synapses are going to be a lot thicker than the person that says, hey, that's the girl from that one show. So those synapses are going to be connected, but really, my line of work as a learning designer is all about that connection and strengthening that connection. So if you are an expert, if you have expert knowledge of it, those are covered with a fatty white substance called myelin. Our role as learning designers is to help fire those synapses enough that myelin is put on the cells so that that synapse is actually well formed. As we know something better, as we know more about Jennifer Aniston, the brain cells that hold that connection are going to have more myelin on them. So really, my role, and your role if you're a learning designer as well, is to engage your neurons. One of the things I do for my living is building online training modules. I use tools like Storyline, I use Captivate, Camtasia, I use all number of different tools. I've made hundreds, if not thousands, of different e-learning modules. Sometimes I feel like I need to apologize because some of those are really bad, even some of the ones that I made. One of the things that is the worst sin of e-learning, I think, is that module where not only is the narrator reading to you every single bullet on slide, but next button's locked down. So what do? Scan the slides, you're listening, and your mind just watches that seek bar. Watches that seek bar go all the way across the slide until you can click next and move on to the next one. Are your neurons firing? Are those synapses actually firing and we're strengthening? Are we myelinating our brain cells? Are we paying attention and having it work? No. We're simply waiting for it to click next. So I'm not just a learning designer, I'm also a dad. I have 4 kids, a 2-year-old, I have twin 4-year-olds, and I have a just turned 7-year-old. So dinner time at our house is interesting. Maybe I'll say interesting. We see a lot of this. We see a lot of, no, I don't want it. I'm not going to eat it. And I really came home and one night going through that same song and dance, I started thinking about what I do as a dad, or as a parent. Really, I'm looking for this sweet spot, the overlap between something that is yummy enough that my kids will want it, yet nutritious enough that I want them to. That's where our meals take place. All that mac and cheese is right there in that sweet spot between yummy and nutritious. As a learning designer, well, it's very much the same thing. I'm looking for something interesting enough that my learners are going to pay attention to it. Those synapses are going to fire, and they're going to activate the other synapses around it that store the other information that they know about the topic. Yet, it's also informative enough that I want them paying attention. So really, in both cases, what we're looking for is that sweet spot. So I am a chef, and I use blended learning recipes to feed the brains of the organizations that hire me. Now in a little bit, I'll give you some example of different blended learning recipes, but first I want to set the stage with sort of a creative exercise to help get your creative juices flowing. I want you to look at what you're doing now, and after we've gone through this exercise, ask yourself, does your learning program have a good mix of color on the plate? Here's what I mean by that. We're also going to talk about butter, which is important. Consider the tools that you use. Consider the strategies that you use to train your learners. Which learning technologies? We're going to go into a wonderful world here of food metaphors for a minute, so I hope you're not hungry as you watch this. Which learning technologies are on your learner's plate? Every plate has a nice main dish, right? Something of substance and value. I really think the most valuable thing that you can do is some kind of live training. I'm a big fan of online learning, but I feel like live training should always be the main dish. Now that doesn't just mean actual people in a room together. Face-to-face instruction is wonderful, instructor-led training, coaching, all of these are wonderful ways to learn. But you can also use technology for some of these things, that we could have a webcam chat with telepresence and multiple webcams, and people are actually talking and answering and interacting and engaging with one another, firing those synapses about the material. I call this the main dish because a facilitator, whether online or in person, they're able to listen to you and share expertise and knowledge and be able to customize it and adapt it to your questions so that as your synapses are firing, they can keep that connection going and keep adding new connections around it versus an online module that everyone goes through it and most times is going to see exactly the same thing. So live training is the main dish. Get people together, whether it's using tools or whether it's not, for some kind of meaningful discussion. So what's next? What's the carbs? What's the rice? What's the French fries? What's the potatoes? What's all those yummy, carby things that I try not to eat because I'm dieting now? I look at these as kind of like your online modules. Online modules like carbs, available anywhere, anytime. They can be very cheap. They have automated enrollment and scoring and tracking. That's very appealing. But if you have nothing but carbs in your diet and you learn from nothing but online modules, you're going to feel sluggish and bloated. You really do need a mix of different things. You can't simply get by on just one approach. What else do you put on your plate? We have vegetables. What are your vegetables? I think vegetables are a lot like your performance support tools. I'm talking about those just-in-time guides, the checklist, the cheat sheets, the reference guides, the FAQs. Any of those things are like vegetables because both. They're cheap, they're easy to prepare, and sadly, most people don't get enough of them. I know I don't get in as many guides in my training modules as I would like. A lot of times clients want to push forward with the things that we track and measure, and it's a 30-minute course, and if someone only needs 2 minutes of that course, there's no way for them to get at that 2 minutes quickly and easily. So as you're designing, be sure that there's a mix, a little splash of green on your plate. Then make sure that they have some access to some just-in-time learning. They're going to be a lot more successful if they do. Fruits, juicy, sweet. Who doesn't like a wonderful slice of cold watermelon on a hot day? Who doesn't love a cell phone? I think fruits are a lot like your mobile learning. Consider a mobile strategy. Are there fruits on your plate? Are you giving your learners what they want, which is to use their phone to be able to access things? Whether it's to do just-in-time training like we were talking about with fruits and vegetables, where they'd be able to look up something real quickly as they need it, or even to be able, I just watched 3 hours worth of stand-up comedy on my phone in my bed because it was convenient and it was easy. So consider the mix of fruits and vegetables, the performance support and the mobile learning that you're including for your learners. There's all sorts of wonderful things we can do with a mobile mindset, and we can talk more about those. But really, phones have tapped into a really primal need we have for knowledge. I believe that we are like infovores. We feed on information. We crave knowledge. And these smartphones feed our brains and our cravings for more information. And I could go on about that. But instead, we'll move to my favorite. Well, my second favorite, dessert. Love dessert. It's wonderful. It's usually someone's favorite part of the meal. It can be like games. Games are usually somebody's favorite part of the course. Games are a very wonderful way. They're a great technique. They're usually someone's favorite part of the meal for a reason. But beware the mental effect. Any good meal has dessert, right? I look at dessert as sort of like the games in your training. Games are a wonderful way to learn from your mistakes. There's a huge difference between nearly passing the quiz that you need to complete your module and almost beating the boss at the level to go on to the next level. With the quiz, you just want to get it over with. With the game, there's something interesting and motivating about leveling up and getting further in the game and competing, and you want to try again if it's a good game. Whereas a quiz, you don't just want to get it over with. So a lot of times there is sort of a danger. You can't only eat desserts. You need balance of other nutritional items. Games and learning work the same way. You want to make sure that you're not putting a bunch of time into some Family Feud theme where your learners are actually spending more time on the game and the Family Feud and the theme than they are on actually learning and firing the synapses on what we're really trying to teach them. So use games, use them in moderation. Just like desserts, you need some desserts, not every dessert or only desserts. Because look out for those empty mental calories. Finally, butter. Butter is one of my favorite things. I don't cook a whole lot. I do add a little butter to my macaroni and cheese. I add a little bit of butter to vegetables. I add basically, one of my go-to moves is just put in more butter than you're supposed to. Add a little bit more than's in the recipe. And what do people say? Man, this is good. Butter. This whole corny series of food metaphors really started, I was doing a coaching session with a younger instructional designer, and I was making a passionate plea for the remaining technology here. Any idea what that is? It's printed materials. A little bit of printed materials can make all the difference. It can be as simple as a worksheet that has fill in the blanks, and as you sit in my talk, you can fill in different items as we go. That's going to help fire those synapses, and it's going to be a wonderful takeaway that you can use when the session is over. Hey, what was that thing you said about vegetables? What were they again and why? Hi, I can look at that sheet and I can actually tell. So I'm not saying print everything. What I'm not saying is eat a whole stick of butter. That's gross. What I'm saying is that a little bit of printed materials really can make a difference. If you print up all 44 slides of your presentation and hand them out to people, it's disgusting. That's like a deep-fried stick of Oreo that you would eat at the fair. It's just not what you need. Would a pat of butter help your learners the same way a pat of paper would? Put a little bit of print materials into your designs. Make sure that your learners get a mix of all those. So I do have a meal plan metaphor where we actually went in here a little bit closer, and this is kind of a summary and a wrap-up of this. I go ahead then and I look at the different technologies. We'll go in and we'll actually talk about the different ingredients that we can use. Tools like Storyline and Camtasia and Captivate and Snagit, and what if we did a video here, and what if we used Rise to do this, and what if we had a role play session here, and what if we had an FAQ. So I have specific examples of different blended learning recipes that I'd like to do, and then we'll be giving people a little bit of time to go ahead and actually work on a blended learning recipe of their own. Again, I'm trying to help you make a decision on who to pick for speaking at DevLearn. So I wanted to just give you a little taste, pun very much intended, of what this presentation is and what I mean with these food metaphors. I do have specific examples, and really, like, this is the key part of my message, is that thoughts change your brain. Physical connections happen inside your brain as you learn. Very much the same way that calories can change your body. So the way that you're thinking is going to build your brain. If you are not thinking, if you are not exercising your mental muscles, you are not building connections. It's very much like coming home as a parent, and you can spend all the money and all the time on getting vegetables, and if the kids don't eat it, it does them no nutritional value. You can have a poorly designed e-learning module that takes all the time and all the cost, and no one pays attention to it, and it slides right off into the trash, the same way that those vegetables would. So my key takeaways for this: don't be afraid to mix it up. Different ingredients, spice it up, engage the learner in multiple ways, and be sure that you're looking for the sweet spot of both interesting and informative, because that's what it takes to be memorable. I hope this helps you make a decision and that you find the right people to pick for DevLearn, and would be very honored to be able to speak at conference. Thanks.